Okay, so I'm finishing up the video from last time, if I can. Now, we are spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thinking creates the reality around us, and we are all connected to one another. This is that we are all connected to other real human beings. We are not connected to the furniture or anything that is not spiritual. So we're not connected to any form of so-called life that is not spiritual. But anyway, that's just the basic core of what human beings, real human beings are. Because you can have different life forms, I think. But I'm not sure about that because I mainly only see human beings. But even amongst human beings, some are more spiritual than others, as you can imagine. And most of us, like myself, have not been particularly spiritual in my actual life because, as I've said before, despite the fact that we are spiritual beings in a body that is not spiritual but kind of is spiritual too, that I do not fully understand. But even the human body in its authentic natural state had the purpose, I think, of making the human being develop to its best potential at a spiritual level, even low. We are here in a matrix, which is an artificial world, really, because the matrix does not operate naturally as human beings originally did and as natural life forms would. It is completely artificial in the sense that it is like, I suppose I can't think of good examples, but I suppose it's a bit like when you go right out into the country as opposed to being in the city. That's not a good example, but when you're in the city, everything is much more controlled because you have like your traffic lights, you have more technology, you have more directions. Because there are so many more people in the area, it is a lot more controlled. A matrix is a control system. When you go further out into the country, there is less of the matrix, or at least there's less of a control system. In reality, the whole world is a control system, is a matrix, because it is the whole earth is a matrix. The whole thing is totally constructed that way. Some areas might appear to be less of a matrix than others because of, yes, the number of people and where you are, but it's still a matrix, and it's still, things that happen wherever you are will be part of the matrix. The matrix is a video game that is played. It is like an artificial world that we play in, that human beings who are not artificial, at least the real ones, when I say real, because even human beings can become artificial. They can become more like the world around them, which we do, which is what I've done through my life, because if you have the matrix all around you, you adapt to the matrix. The matrix doesn't adapt to me. I adapt to the matrix. Now, whether it should be the other way around is another thing. In fact, whether that would even be possible is another thing. I can't say that. In my fantasy way of looking at it, and I say it's fantasy because I don't know if it's true, I think there is a possibility that if real humans who do create thinking, and in that thinking it turns into a physical reality, if the vibration and frequency is strong enough to turn it into matter. But that can only happen, I think, I would assume, if, like, say I'm a real human being, right? And I assume I am, but I'm going to say this is going to be speculation. So I'm a real human being. That means that, because you can't tell, I mean, I could be an illusion, couldn't I? I could be part of the matrix. I could be like something that's a hologram, say, because we've heard about that. You know, a lot of things could be holograms, particularly if it's on a technical device, because a technical device is not real. You know, it can put a picture there. It doesn't have, I mean, I am here and I'm assuming that I'm transmitting to real human beings, but the matrix could easily put someone else here as a hologram, and it would fool me, so it would probably fool others, I would think. I'm not saying they do that necessarily, but I'm saying they could, because they have the technology and they control, it's a whole control thing. They tend to play it at our level, to the level that we adapt to. As we go to a higher level, they will put more technology and more of that stuff onto us, because we will accept it, you see. It's like if I'm watching TV and then I decide to go to the computer, you know, everything can progress one way or the other. But anyway, I've gone off track again, I'm sorry. Where was I? Oh, yes. I need someone here to dong me from behind, because I'm almost worse than a hologram, because a hologram would probably have the written script and so they wouldn't falter, whereas I'm going along as I see fit, you know. But at any rate, I would imagine that the best way to create reality with your thinking, because that's what we really do, but like I say, we are controlled by the matrix, so the matrix tends to create for us in a way, because if the matrix controls my thinking, like for instance, if the matrix makes me depressed, which it mostly does, because life is depressing for most people, then what I create will not be positive. I will not even be thinking of something positive. I will be at a low frequency. Then what is created will be negative, or at least the input will be negative. And also it is possible then I have been told that then the matrix can implant negative thoughts, because human beings are meant to operate at a high frequency. While if I was operating at a high frequency, I would be untouchable. Literally. The matrix would not be able to touch me. The matrix would not be able to implant negative thoughts. But while we are kept at a low frequency, the matrix can implant negative thoughts. You have the choice to dismiss them or to entertain them, but if you're already depressed and angry and the matrix is a war zone around you, you will go with that thought. You won't be able to resist it, because you will be in that frequency, in that negative frame of mind. You will be full of anger and negative thinking. And this is how it works. This is how the matrix stays. The matrix can only exist at a low frequency, I think. It could literally disappear and turn into something completely different if all natural, real human beings were at high frequency. But either way, they would be untouchable, so they would not be affected by the matrix. They would walk through a war zone. They would not care. They would not be hurt by it. You see, so it is a mindset, whichever way you look at it. It is a mind game. This is a physical world we live in, but it is being played by the matrix and by those that control the matrix at a mind level, because they know that the human thought creates the physical reality. They know that the human being, the authentic human beings, have that ability, because that is what they are. That was how they were created originally. They were given that that ability, but they didn't develop it because they were intercepted. There was intervention that prevented their progress and prevented them. As time has went on, the matrix has taken over all our minds to where we actually don't think that we have any abilities at all. None. Whereas in reality, we were meant to develop vast amounts of abilities. They were there for our taking. They were like in our DNA, you could almost say. Junk DNA, we have about 90% or something. No, I think it's more than that, 95 or something. I don't understand these things. But all that is meant to be activated. It's what they call junk DNA. But even if I'm not 100% accurate on this, it's still the same principle, because I'm not a scientist. And even science is so deceptive. I mean, like, you wouldn't know if what science is right or not, because science is changing all the time. Science is for the matrix, not for us. We are the players in the game. We're not meant to know how the matrix works. We're not meant to know the science behind it or the technology behind it, and we don't. But if we were at a high frequency, we would probably understand these things more, and we wouldn't worry about them either way, because, like I say, we'd be untouchable. But also, we would understand these things, and we would just develop, and the matrix would disintegrate literally around us, probably a bit like is that like in the Matrix movie? I'm not sure. I think a bit like that, but it would be like that, because if that is what human beings naturally do, but they're unaware of it and they're controlled by the matrix, their surroundings, because we think we're natural and we're in a natural world, but in reality, there's some of us that are natural. There's a lot that's artificial, and everything around us mainly is artificial, and also it's total. We're in fairyland in the sense that we don't understand anything of what goes on around us. We think it's all very simple, whereas in reality, it is simple if we understood it, but we don't understand it, and we've never been educated that way even, and we haven't been allowed to be ourselves to where we would naturally know these things. I think that's what this awakening type of thing is about, because clearly we're not educated on it. But I think even if we were just left alone, a lot of us would realise some things, as I have, although I have seen the Matrix. So when you see the Matrix, you don't have to wake up. The Matrix is waking you up, because it's like saying, hey, you are about to raise the frequency. So the Matrix exposes itself then, because it says you have to come down in the frequency, because we have to keep the Matrix the same way, because that's just the world we live in. That's the world we have come into. Now, whether we have chose to or whether we were, I do not know these things. I would imagine there has been some choice at some point, because I am told that humans' main thing is that they do have free choice. Everything for a real human is about choice. That is all we have got left now, is choice. But unfortunately, because the Matrix, we have let the Matrix run amok around us, because we can slow the Matrix down, I would imagine. We have, like I myself in my life have just let the Matrix totally control me. In other words, totally dictate my life, because it's not like, I mean, it can come down heavy physically, but it's still up to you to how you react to it, But the harder, the stronger the Matrix gets, then the harder that is going to be. At the start, it is more simple. So if you keep making the right choices, the Matrix will not be as strong. But if you keep making the wrong choices, like myself even, through a life, then by the time you're towards the end of your life, the Matrix will be all-powerful, completely powerful, and you will be powerless, because you will have given your power over to the Matrix. You won't understand it'd be a bit like saying if you had an ability, you would be unaware of it, so you'd be powerless to use it, even in your own defence, or to change something, or to just, to survive it. But anyway, I've rambled too much there. The point what I was making, though, was that this connection to other real human beings that are at a spiritual level. Because I think that some human beings can throw away, become so less spiritual, because that's what I was even a lot of my life. In other words, if you don't think that you have any, if you think everything is all physical 100%, and that you as a human being really are not important at a spiritual level, that you're just another walking kind of physical, technical being almost, because that's what it comes down to. If you become totally physical, you're really only a technical being, and there could be other names for that. And if you go too far that way, you can actually mentally be the equivalent of a robot in a way. The equivalent, you know what I mean? And clearly, I would think that most people would say that human beings are not really that, but you know, at a physical, at a mental level, you can become that if you believe totally in the physical and operate that way, and operate particularly at a defensive kind of singular level, to where you say, I am just my body. The only thing that counts in this world is the survival of my body. I will do anything to make sure that my body alone survives another few years. You know, you're really into that. You don't think there's anything else, and you certainly don't think that you are a creator. You think that you only create with your hands. You don't think that there's any such thing as the vibration and the frequency, which actually is a reality. Even at a scientific level, that is actually true. They're discovering that now. They tell us this. You know, and it was the famous statement of a famous man, which I only found out about a year ago, Tesla. His famous line was, everything is frequency, vibration, and energy. You know, this was 100 years ago. So you can see that we don't really make much progress. We're not really told anything to where we understand remotely that there is more to this reality than just everything that's physical, even though we are entrenched in it and can only see that. You know, we are meant to probably be able to see more, I would think. You know, if I had raised my frequency more, I might be able to actually see a bit more. I mean, even at a physical level, see more of, whereas now we're operating in this awareness, which is also what we're meant to be totally aware, which many have said this, and I agree with this. In other words, awareness is just simply where what you saw before, you now see more to it. In other words, if you looked at a billboard, as we all do, instead of seeing just the product that they're selling you will read into that, and it will mean much more than just that product. It will actually be telling you something. It could be telling you to be aware of tomorrow in some way. Oh, this is awareness. In other words, that everything around you actually is meant for you. Because you are a spiritual being, and you don't know that, you don't realize that the matrix has to show you everything. So the matrix operates for and against the natural, authentic human being. Now, this is an interesting thing. You'd say, why would it operate for and against? Why wouldn't it just be for or against? Well, that's because it is really working against. But it has to also show you the truth and has to work for you, because this is what I agree with. Because otherwise, why would it do this? Why would I be shown the truth when the matrix would prefer to keep the truth from me? Because that way the matrix keeps going. Because the matrix doesn't want too much. The matrix doesn't want you to see how it works, because then it's like in The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy pulls the curtain and sees the whole thing, you know, and then Oz is not as much fun anymore for the controllers, because, you know, it's like if you're watching a movie, you don't really want to see everything that goes on behind the scenes, because then it becomes too real. You've lost the fantasy. The fantasy is gone then. and it's no fun anymore for the player. The player refuses to play, you probably won't even watch, and even the controller, the maker of the video game, the maker of the Oz, then is exposed and can't really make me play anymore, because it's, so it's kind of like that. Am I explaining it right or not? I don't think I am, but so also the thing is that why the human beings are not able to even change the video game a little bit is because they are not operating joined together. They are all connected. As I said, we're spiritual beings. Our thought creates reality. Our thought creates the reality, but we're all connected. But we are not all connected. We are disconnected all now. There is not many of us that are actually even at a remotely high level. So therefore our connection is weak. So therefore the ability to create a different world, because if we were connected and we wanted to raise the frequency of the earth and change the reality, this is not going to be possible unless we are connected, because the more of us that are connected, naturally that is more power. Otherwise it's the other way around, which is exactly how the matrix works, where most human beings are working for the matrix, for the earth as it is now, and they are combined in keeping the matrix going, because they believe in the matrix. They don't believe in, they may even like it. They may be convinced that this is the way. It's a bit like technology. Many people believe that it is a good thing, that it is a benefit to the human being, that it will give them more. This is what they're told and educated along this line too. Now, I would imagine, I don't know in schools and things, but they use the computers now, so I would imagine that this is the way of thinking. And if that is the world you are born into, you will believe that and you will go along with it, and you will think that is all there is, and you will think that is the best. I'm saying that I've never agreed with that and will never agree with that. That is not the way that a real human being was meant to operate. Now, yes, there's not so many options now because of the reality that that we are disconnected, and that we are not at a high enough frequency to connect or to create a pleasant, desirable, safe, harmonious reality. I'm trying to use words here, but what I'm saying is that the world is very chaotic, and it is very negative, and it is very violent, and it is at odds with one another. And even at mental levels, human beings are not seeing what they are or how they are meant to be, and neither did I most of my life. There were many things that I would have went along with thinking they were good, right up till quite recently, because I would not have seen any harm in them. In fact, even freedom and being broad-minded in this world is a trick of the mind of the matrix, because the matrix is extremely clever. The matrix has all the answers. The matrix knows me. I do not know the matrix. The matrix knows my mind, my thought, and uses that too to create and to influence other human beings, because human beings are not at this stage so technological that they still think that everything is black and white. In other words, most human beings still think in terms, to a certain extent. They're certainly being coerced into a more bland way of thinking, I would say. I'm not putting this very well. In other words, they're less connected to themselves, less connected to themselves and to other human beings, but that is because of technology. So they're more connected to technology. They see technology now, and I do this to myself, which is terrible, in the sense that you might have more friends on your technological device than what you have in front of you. And this is the danger. In other words, then you go more into the technological matrix world that we live in. I'm saying we should, myself, I believe we should stop that and go back a bit, or at least not progress that way, because you can go too much that way. You know, it's like everything. You can have too many extremes. You know, you don't want 100% technological world. And as it is, the Matrix is really like that, but we don't see it because we don't see the technology. We go along with it, but it influences. Because if the technology controls your mind and we control the Matrix, that's, you know, think about that. If technology controls my mind, and my mind controls or contributes to what the Matrix is and what it becomes, you know, that's putting it simply. And I don't know if I've explained that. I'm not even sure if I fully understand it myself. I have to admit that it's a big thing to think about for a limited human being that has been controlled by the Matrix and by the environment, which is the same thing. Everything that is around you, the environment, is the Matrix. But it is not all random. It is not all natural. It appears to be, but it's not. Just like we often think that our thinking is natural. Our reactions are natural. But in reality, everything I do is a reaction to the Matrix. Because I'm not living in a free world. In other words, I'm not living in a free environment that isn't a video game. If I was not living in a video game, yes, it would be a different thing. That's what we think, we're not living in a video game. But if you're living in a video game where everything is set up and maneuvered around each real human being, you know, you are playing a game. You're not dealing with a random natural world that just falls a certain way to where you think that you have a lot more, even at a physical level, influence over it. You don't. You don't have any influence over it hardly at all. You can only react to it. How you react is the only real thing. And that's why I say humans have to be given choice. I realise I'm sounding stupid now for some reason. Sorry. But yes, humans have to be given the choice. I've said this before. So in other words, why would the Matrix give me a choice when it doesn't really want to? Because it has to. It wants me to follow and go completely with the Matrix. It doesn't want me to put up opposition to the Matrix, or at least only put up a little bit. In other words, it wants to control it wants me to play in that game as it wants me to. It doesn't want me to play independently, if possible, because it's possible that if I play independently, I might decide to raise the vibration, because that's what humans would naturally do, you see. Because humans are meant to be at a high vibration. We're not meant to be down at a low vibration where we're negative and miserable and only are living and acting like the lowest life forms. You know, that's why we now idolise technology, because we have become such a low life form that we think technology is a reasonably high life form. That's what it's come to. Whereas in reality, we're supposed to be up at a huge high level. Technology is just a machine, just a mechanical load of junk that should be chucked into the garbage tip. You know, doesn't matter how advanced it is, it's just a machine. You know, that is the basic truth of technology. We used to know that 50 years ago. Now we don't seem to know it anymore. We seem to think, oh wow, this is actually some sort of life form. No, it's not. It's just stealing off us. It's just stealing every single human thought. Every single human being is being stolen, their thoughts, by technology to create an artificial life form that then appears to be better than us because we have been kept right down. And then the fake technology, which is limited and can only go so far anyway, will rise way above us. Of course it will, because we are kept down here. We're meant to be way up here. We're meant to be limitless. We are limitless. But we're not because of the technological world and because of the mind game that is played against us. And we go along with it and we believe it because we're brought up to it from the day we're born. I'm saying all this, and even I am playing in the Matrix worse than most people every day. It makes me feel sick because it's like I don't want to play. But how can I not play when the car is in front of me? In other words, you go outside and the video game starts. So therefore, you are forced to play. You know, the idea, of course, is that, as I've said before, if you can raise the frequency, raise your mindset, and this is why Matrix knows this. So that is why the Matrix plays has to have the environment around you a certain way and keep playing it that way to keep you at that, to where you keep playing in the Matrix. The Matrix does not want a world of people in it that won't play the game, play up and play the game. It can't survive. And there's no point in having the Matrix if everyone says, oh, you know, we've got a football field in front of us, let's go play. And everyone says, no, don't think we're going to play. I think we're just going to fly around and have a good time. We're not, we think that game's silly. We've got beyond that game. We've now got other skills. We can fly. We can go anywhere we can go anywhere. We can do anything. Kicking a ball seems stupid to us now. Sorry, we used to enjoy that, but now we don't want to do it. It's just too low of a level for us. So it's kind of like that. But for those who want to keep playing in the Matrix, that is fine. You can do that, and many will. And some people, and many people, and including myself in the past, and still doing it in a way, will not be able to not play in the Matrix. So because, like I say, when your frequency is very low, you can't raise the vibration to where you can do anything else, or to be aware that you could do anything else. So naturally you think the Matrix is good and that you should play it. Because if that's all you can see and that's all you can actually do, because you are limited, because you've been kept, because you're at a low frequency. It's a bit like, I suppose it'd be a bit like, trying to find an example without sounding too ridiculous, but I suppose it's a bit like anything. If you haven't experienced something, you don't know what you're missing, you know? You think that what you do experience is all there is, and that's the best there is, so you accept it and you play. Whereas if you raise the frequency, then you would become aware that, you know, that you don't have to play, and you probably wouldn't want to play. It would be a choice. Yeah, there's a choice even now, but like I say, it's hard to make that choice if you aren't experiencing the option. And I'm not putting this very well, but also, as I said before, if we were all combined, actually with the thoughts transmitting to one another, to real humans, and we were at a slightly higher frequency, automatically things would change a little bit. They would change. They would not be the same. They would be more what you wanted, what you consciously wanted would materialize, in other words, eventually, because that would be the vibration and the frequency that you were exchanging and then creating. And I would think that if that happened, that the technology then would be obsolete. would become obsolete, because you wouldn't need it and you wouldn't want it, because you would say this is limiting, whereas the creation, to just be able to create at a joint level whatever you want, that's not just even communicating. That is a power much more beyond just like the internet that we use now to communicate, or a telephone that we use, which sometimes is a good form of communication, and most of the time is, like I say, controlled by the matrix. But also what I'm saying is that it's not instantaneous. It's not something you have full control over, and you can't. It's an environmental thing. It's limited. It's limited. But we think it's not. We think it's, to our way of thinking and to our reality, we think it's very, very advanced. Now, I don't think I explained that very well. Just wait for the plane to go over. And I've rambled on again with my usual introduction, and I was going to continue what I did in the previous video, because I don't think it was very good. It was a fantasy thing. I don't know if I've got time. But the fantasy, this is a fantasy, okay, what I'm saying now. Everything I said before is what I believe to be true, but it still would probably be a fantasy to most people. But I believe in all fantasies anyway, but I'm going to say the next thing that I say is not part, it could be part of what I just said, but I'm going to, what's the word? I'm going to make, is it a disclaimer? Where you say at the start, hey, this is now, now going into fairyland, we're now going into fiction, okay? This book that I'm writing now, or telling the fairy tale from, is fiction. If you want to think that it's a possibility, or you already think that it is true, that's okay too, because I watch many things that I see are fiction that I say, hey, that's not only a possibility, I think it's true, I think it did happen, but there might be discrepancies in the story, but what I'm saying is, okay, so the previous video was the fantasy, the story tale, the legend, I don't know, I'm trying to use a word that describes something that can't be proven and that is of one's imagination, but it also may be based on what some other people consider to be facts. It may even come from other sources where some people might say it's fact or it's not. In other words, it will be up to each person to decide how they want to see it, whether they want to see it as entertainment, a fairy tale, or a truth, or whatever. It's purely, every time I see something, this is how I look at things. I see one story, another person sees the same story. I say, I think that's true. Another person says, I think that is not true. So it's each person's way of seeing a story even. Now the story was, there was a creator. The creator created a human being. The creator created the human being in their image to a certain extent, whereas you can create life. Like I could create something right now with my hands, I suppose. And I created that, but it is not me. If I create something with my hands, I create an artificial, like I say, I could build a robot. I could build it out of material. And if I was a bit more scientific, or a bit more technical, or a bit more engineer, or I don't know what the words are, but I could make it move, and I could make it this. We've done all these things, but I'm not. It's not me. I'm not. It's not a creation of me. Whereas in the original story, the idea was that the human beings were created as a seed of the God. In other words, like the God's children. So it was the same. Not the same, but the same in the sense that it had the same, the potential for the same, well, you know what I'm saying. Like, if a cat has kittens, it's different to a human being having a baby. They're both life forms, but they're different life forms. But if you make something very technical and that's not even a life form. It's something that moves, and it may look like life, and we may even like it. You can like a teddy bear, but the teddy bear is only as real as what you put your love into it. You make it real, but in reality, it's not really a life force, not a living life force, is it? It's made of materials and technical, physical things. I'm not putting this very well, but in that original story, okay, in that original fantasy, fairy tale, fiction, book, whatever, in the original fictional story of life being created, let's say it was me that was created. I am a human being. I was created by a creator. I was put here on a natural world at the beginning. This is obviously not true now. This is fantasy anyway. But and I was the creator, and I had other beings in heaven, shall we say. Heaven. Say heaven and earth. They say heaven and earth, so let's go there. Heaven and earth. In heaven, that is outside of this earth, in other words. Heaven is what is outside of what we know. Okay, that's I don't understand it, so I'm just putting it simply. Who knows what boundaries there are, where the boundary of earth and heaven starts and begins. Another dimension, a boundary crossing over. Maybe if I was at a higher frequency, I would understand what I'm talking about a bit more. I'm sure this is the case, because if you start to wake and see a few things when you're really at low frequency, I would imagine, and this is only on my own personal experience, because I know that that things come a lot more natural. You think more clear when you're at a higher frequency. Even when you feel a bit better, you think clearer. You think poorly when you're at low frequency, when you feel bad. You don't think at all, really. Then the matrix just takes over. Then you're just a total victim of your environment, literally, whichever way you look at it. That's just a fact for everyone, even if you don't believe in anything. Low frequency, you are a victim. You're waiting and manipulated by every event that happens. If you're feeling down in the dumps and someone says something to you that was negative, you could hit out in a very aggressive way. You could be brought down much more. If you're feeling positive, it's water off a duck's back. That's essentially how it works, and that's how it really works for most people in reality, even if we were living in a real world. In other words, if we weren't living in what I would say is the matrix, where it is all a lot more set up, a lot more controlled. But even if it was a natural world, if things happened occasionally that went against you, you would still, it's up to you how you react. And yourself, you only tend to, if you're feeling good about yourself and everything, you're not going to be particularly upset by anything around you. You've already surpassed that. It's not important. I would think. But anyway, in the I was about to say heaven and hell, because I think that this matrix is a lot more like hell, because it is very different, I would imagine, to my fictional heaven, because we always talk like that, don't we? We always say, hey, I want to go to heaven. So we assume that heaven is better than here. Most people think that there is hell as well, and hell is even worse than here. I actually, in my fantasy fictional book, this is hell and the rest is heaven. But some people think there are 3 places. Some people might think there's 4. Some people say there's a place where you're stuck between, and you're unfeeling, and you haven't been allotted to go to heaven or hell. Well, who knows? This is what I was told when I was very young in some religions, but I don't know. I would say that when you're in that non-state, you're a lot more like where you are just more controlled by the matrix, to where you are almost numb. Yeah, you're almost numb. So then you're just waiting to be directed. But anyway, I'm sounding foolish again, gone, and I am there. That did not make sense. In the heaven and hell. Okay, so I'm saying here is hell, but it doesn't matter. You could say if you think it's okay, it's okay. You know, for some people it's better than others. So for some people it's not really a hell. But I would say that, you know, for most people it probably is so much lower, and the frequency is so low than what they're meant to be experiencing. You know, and if we knew how limited we really were, then we really would be depressed and realise it's hell. But because we think this is the only reality, and that we're not meant to be any different to what we are, we actually don't feel as depressed as what we probably should feel, you see, because we think that we can push it forward in a physical way and change things. And that's just beating, in my fantasy way of looking at it, that's just beating your head against a brick wall. You can't beat fire with fire, as the saying goes, if that makes any sense. You can only put it out with water, or with something that is the opposite. You know, and while you're playing in the matrix, that's what we think we're not. So you don't know you're playing, you don't know that you're putting out fire with fire. I could think of many examples of this that I actually see now. Even good, as I've said before, in the matrix is often just more fire, which is strange. And it's sad because, you know, you can see some good, real humans actually thinking and consciously wanting to make this world different to what it is. They don't like the technological matrix. They want to take it back a bit more to nature. But they're banging their head against a wall because they don't know it's a matrix. They don't know that every way they deal with everything is the direction of the matrix. And that is very distressing if they knew that. And it's distressing if you see it, because you're like, oh, they're wasting their time. They're trying to be positive, and they're trying to do something good. They're actually making it worse, because they're taking humans, real humans, into even more of a fantasy. Because even if you're operating for good, you don't know what the real bottom line truth of that situation is. You can't see it, because how can you? You will be working for the matrix. Because this is a genius level God entity that controls it. And you know, this entity knows that humans are not foolish, not stupid, really. You know, so the God entity has to really play with the human beings' minds, with their feelings, with what he has to really go into that mindset. It is a mind game. It's played at a physical level, and there's a lot of physical destruction because of it. But it is still a mind game, essentially, if you really think of it. Because if we just got our minds to know this and to see it, then we would not be pulled more into the matrix to where we create more havoc and destruction. But we can't do that while we are playing in the matrix. The matrix controls our thinking, directs us and shows us the problem. Says, hey, look, there's a fire over there. Here's a torch, go and put it out. This is the way. You know, I know that's a stupid example, but at the same time, that's what kind of happens. There's situations that go on around us all the time. and we deal with it the best way we can. But we usually deal with it with information given to us by the Matrix, because the Matrix runs the show. The Matrix controls this movie. You know, the only way that you can really you can't change it even, but if you don't want to be putting more fuel to the fire, you have to step out of the movie. You have to say, I'm not going to read my lines as I'm told to. I'm not going to continue with this play. You'll have to get some more actors, and they certainly will have no trouble finding them, because most of us are actors, but we don't know we're actors. And we don't know that most of what we're dealing with is acting. You know, we think that we're in a real life situation, whereas in reality we're in a fake movie, you know, with a director telling other human beings what lines to say, what to do, where to go, what situate, what, you know, and this goes on around us all the time. And that's why I say, if the frequency was raised, I think that this is what I think. Because it's all about frequency, because everything is frequency, vibration and energy. So therefore it has to be then that if you change your frequency, if the very essence of life and this world, and this is what I'm told, okay, if the very essence of it, the very physical reality of it is based on frequency, vibration, energy, then naturally, if I changed my frequency, my vibration, it would have to mean that I would be operating different, wouldn't I? It would have to, if you know what I mean. It would, common sense would even tell you that. Whereas if I believe it's just all physical, but I don't understand how that physical works, I don't understand that the physical is just vibration and frequency, and that even I am, because I can't see that, you know.